Hey everyone, it's OSK. Today I have for you another episode of Spellbreak tier lists and meta snapshot for patch 1.3 chapter 1 release. Now, I'll start off by saying that this is a predictive meta snapshot, meaning that this is what I expect the meta to look like as it develops throughout the patch, and I will have a follow-up episode later on to say for sure what the meta is after it is done being perfected by the player base. Of course, as with all things, this will be my opinion on everything, but I would like to think it's a good opinion. I cast for competitive events, I scrim with some of the best players in the world on occasion, and I have a fair number of wins under my belt, so I've been there and I have a good idea of what is good and what isn't based on all that. Another quick note, we won't be taking Clash into account, as pretty much any build can work on there. It'll be just the Battle Royale, both squads and solos, that I'll take into account. Now before I get started, if this sounds like the kind of stuff you like watching along with guides and gameplay, consider leaving a like when we're done and subscribing to the channel. It'll make sure you won't miss a single video from me. And now with that out of the way, let's get into this. Starting with classes, we had a few changes come in, especially on Frostborn and Tempest. Frostborn saw a huge buff to the Icicle skill with the negation of mana cost from a fully charged Ice Lance. Frostborn was also buffed via the Frost Gauntlet itself. Flash Freeze had its cooldown reduced by 5 seconds down to 15 from 20. Flash Freeze also had its defensive walls expanded upward to block even more spells. All these changes across the board definitely raise the stock of Frostborn, especially when paired with Focus Mana for giant sources of damage with little to no mana cost due to Icicle. Therefore, I'll be moving Frostborn up to A tier along with Pyromancer and Toxicologist. Now with Tempest buffs to Squall, we're about to see an explosion of damage in the meta, quite literally. The new Squall buff makes it so you get the 20% damage increase and 10% damage mitigation bonuses as soon as you get off the ground, when before you had to use a wind jump or rune to maintain your buff, now you can just hop off the ground and achieve the same kind of damage. This opens the door to running Focus Mana on Tempest much more reliably, which results in even bigger damage than what the current iteration of Pyromancer or Frostborn can offer. This will result in Tempest being the first class since launch to join Conduit in the S tier. It took a lot for me to promote it up this high, but when you have the extra movement of wind jumps and wind running, as well as a huge buff to damage seemingly for free, I think it's well deserved. And while yes, Updraft does feel bad at the moment, this should be fixed relatively soon via a hotfix, so nothing much to be worried about there. And on that note, I am not basing this list off of bugs. On the flip side, unfortunately the Stone Gauntlet got hammered by some nerfs, leaving Stone Shaper in the dust in B tier. It's still a great class at close range, but that shift in its preferred playstyle will keep it limited. Moving on to offhand gauntlets, the story is quite the same for Stone. The reduced height on its hitbox as well as the newly introduced damage fall off beyond 25 meters really limits it as an option when playing with it off Stone Shaper class. It's now more easily kited and not as punishing at mid-range as it used to be. It will reside in C tier for now. Lightning saw a small nerf to its damage output, reducing minimum and maximum damage at varying ranges by 15 to 20%, dropping it down to B tier as a reliable but weak long-range damaging gauntlet. It still does have the utility of its elemental interactions and its ability to stun though. Meanwhile, toxic users have shown very well the usefulness of corrosion on their gauntlet, allowing the user to melt the opponent's armor for an extra 12 damage total, taking 4 damage each time with corrosion. This alone is great passive damage and allows for the tracking of enemies as well, but giving both damage and positional information. That's not even to mention its great interactions with various elements and its close range damage as well. And we don't even need to talk about the Frost Gauntlet. It's very firmly in S tier. It was S tier before, and then it got buffs. Not much else to say, borderline overpowered. Now we'll talk about talents. Talents haven't shifted that much at all. In fact, only one talent was changed for Chapter 1, and that was the prologue's biggest menace, Recovery. Recovery received a nerf that decreased its healing off of damage taken to 35% from 50%. This still leaves it in a great spot in the meta, however, as even though the amount healed is reduced, the health recovery portion of the talent still stacks indefinitely with each new source of damage taken. This will, in my estimation, take it out of the overpowered SS tier and instead set it firmly in the middle of S tier. While it is indeed less powerful, it is still better than most of the talents placed below it, especially due to its lower cost. It will no longer be seen as necessary as it used to be, which will allow for a lot more diverse builds, which should shift around the standings in this tier list. On the other side of things, one talent in particular has shown itself to be more powerful than I initially thought, and that is Focus Mana. Focus Mana has proven itself to be an incredibly popular choice of talent due to its scaling with Frost, Fire, and Lightning, and it's still able to be fit into some of the more highly damaging builds in the meta today. With the new changes to Frostborn and Tempest limiting the amount of mana needed to operate the classes, and the default meta build for Pyromancer keeping the talent as well, I see no reason to hold focus mana out of S tier any longer. It has proven to be a force to be reckoned with, and especially this patch, I expect it to be a true menace. One more change on this tier list is going to be the swapping of Ambidextrous and Recklessness. Now that Recovery is nerfed and there is more leeway in terms of talent usage, I expect to see a lot more usage of the Glass Cannon style of build. This should bump Recklessness up a tier. Ambidextrous, on the other hand, just has a lackluster showing compared to the other talents on this list as of right now. We'll see if it gets used to great success, but I'm not expecting much. Lastly, we'll cover runes. Runes haven't changed at all since last patch with the exception of Shadow Step. Shadow Step had a bug fixed in Chapter 1, which now fixes its momentum transfer it had in Prologue. While many will see this as a nerf, and for some classes it is, many toxicologists I've spoken to actually welcome this revert as it makes it easier to land Outbreak procs without mispositioning. While obviously I didn't find this enough to rank Toxicologists as S tier despite its burst potential, I did want to mention the change nonetheless. With no other runes being changed this patch, I feel very confident about the current placements. Dash and Spring Step will still largely remain the best runes in the game for right now. And that is going to do it for my Spellbreak predictive tier lists and meta snapshot for Chapter 1 release. Hope you all enjoyed the video and maybe even learned something about where everything stacks up in the meta today. Of course, this is a predictive tier list that I'm basing on my years of experience with the game and the competitive community. We will have to see how the meta develops further onto the patch, but I think that this is a good starting point, and I will be posting an update to this list later on. Whether you agree or disagree, please be sure to let me know down in the comments, and also feel free to like the video and subscribe to the channel if you are feeling so inclined. I'd like to announce real quick that I am taking a vacation of sorts starting this weekend, so I will not be putting up any videos or spellcast podcasts for a while, but I will be back right after Christmas to grind out Chapter 1 with all of you. Anyway, that's going to do it for me. Y'all have a wonderful day, and I will see you all out there.